job. But what I'd like to do now, understanding what she said, is put a couple of what she was saying ideas together and make it New Mexico. So I'm going to put a New Mexico flavor to what she was talking about, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about my own concerns about where we're going in the future. Her perception, and it was correct, took into consideration all the schools that are called charter schools across the United States. Let's look at New Mexico as a charter school and how we came to fulfill the request that was asked of us when we first were asked about charter schools in the 90s. I was around there. I was around when it happened. I was the chair of education when that became. There was the need. The needs were the same that they talked about. We want to be able to have an opportunity to go someplace else. Let us have a different kind of opportunity in which we were able to look at the education of our child. So we took that into consideration. And I say this early on, and I'll say it probably over and over again. New Mexico is unique, but New Mexico was a positive unique in that we have a constitution that was very clear from the onset that said we cannot use public money for private education. Other state constitutions were not as bold or smart as New Mexico was early on. And so when we took on the idea of the whole concept of charter schools, we said, you know what, we can never allow that to happen to us under the current rules and regulations. So we worked around that as our core. That being stated, we looked at, and as was stated by Dad, charter schools are public schools. But we really continued to look at that and said, how are you going to fund that money? Because we're an equalized funding formula state, there's a different opportunities in how those monies flow. Sometimes there are states that have, and I'm not exaggerating, 15-20% of their federal, their state funds flow into schools, and then they use a lot of other local dollars to fund those schools. We don't do that. All the money comes from Santa Fe, so the only time we use local dollars, as you well know, is to build the buildings. And we went to court on that one, as we should have. And we figured that out. Nonetheless, look at the right things that we've done. Unfortunately, it's going wrong, but the right things that we have done when we put together that bill that said, that public school, that charter school will be a public school, we will fund it as such. And because of that, those students that are coming in are going to get the same amount of money as the students going down the road if they were like students. Therein lies a little bit of a problem that's been addressed, and I don't have to repeat it. What if you're a child that needs special services? Well, a charter school, should they choose, and that was a reference that the superintendent was making, that I was excited about. Should they choose to go ahead and move in that direction, we could really do something extra and different for those students that had exceptional needs, one way or another, that they could be fulfilled. Unfortunately, we know it costs a lot to fulfill the needs of those students. And as of late, nothing much has happened at one end. A lot has happened at the other end. For those exceptional students who do great, doing really high test scores, etc., they're getting a whole lot more. At the other end, those students who are not being able to come to school, do well, miss out on opportunities, don't test well. There's a few people, we don't know who they are, there's a few people that take the time, we'll hear from them, that take the time to say, I want those students, and those are the students I want to focus on. So the difference, of course, being where we wrote, and here's some of the mistakes, we weren't perfect, but we were smart. We said, we're going to give those schools an opportunity to not break the rules, but have an opportunity for waivers, as they call them. And we give those people an opportunity to move differently in different positions, such as they can ask for different curricula, etc., etc. That was expected, and we figured that was what was going to make those schools different. The other one that's worth noting, and was brought up this morning, is that we wanted them, on top of the waivers, is we wanted them to be able to meet the rules and regulations, but to be able to have an opportunity for schools to be innovative. Not the same old school. And you're listening to someone who was there when we created this. So the idea was not to just have another 8th grade, the superintendent brought it forward, not another 8th grade class down the street right next to the public school, which is right next to the charter school, which is right down the street from the other charter school. The whole idea was not supposed to be about recreating the same school. It was supposed to be innovative. And when that innovation worked, you share that with the public schools. We were all in this together. That's how we started out. Although many of us were well aware of the fact that we only brought it up a few times, and I'm going to end with this, but I'm going to bring it up now, is that at that time we were dealing with something called vouchers. And in New Mexico, it was brought forth to us, not in a hidden form, but in a very bold form. They just wanted to have a voucher. We were one of the first ones to come out of the gate with it. You know, it didn't sit well with the New Mexicans. It didn't sit well with the individuals who were at that place. The parents didn't do well. So I'll come back to that, like I said, and I'll end that conversation. So we moved, understanding we were just fresh off the bat with vouchers, as we moved into expanding the whole idea of the charter schools. We were well aware of that. Let's keep this at bay. Let's keep this at bay. And we did. So that our laws surrounded that concept. I think what is important now, as we try to put this together, and my direction is to put the New Mexico flavor to it, is that we look at, well, how does all that work with what we have right now? We have many charter schools, and as was noted, there were some corrals put around us by the Fed saying you can't even apply for those monies unless you have some certain rules and regulations to charter schools. And we did have caps. They're big, they're far-reaching, but we had caps. So we said, we're not going to lower the caps. We have a cap. We're not going to open up the caps because they're big enough as they are. So we left them alone. There's a lot of push to move and have more and more schools. But we have plenty of schools now. We have rules and regulations that say you cannot have more than 10% of any and all charter schools overwhelm the regular schools that are in that particular district. You can only go so far and so high. And Taos has gotten really close to that number, but we haven't overwhelmed that number yet. So we have some rules and regulations that will hold us into that arena. That being said, how does that money flow? The money flows like any other. It's worth noting the exception and how things are starting to come apart. And with the time that I have left, I want to share this with you, because I think it gives you clear indications to where we're going, what's happening in the legislature, what's happening to the whole concept of charter schools and of people's ability to choose for themselves. Well, there was a bill last year that you heard that was going to come out by the President Governor. It's a 10% raise for all teachers. My phone was ringing off of the hook. For new teachers, I had the older teachers wanting to know, well, where's my 10% going to come? Good question. But everybody was worried about that. I was worried about, well, what's the new teacher? Is that the person that just came in? This has to do with charters. This has to do with the whole idea. From that concept, when the bill finally came to us, you didn't hear about it because we killed that piece of legislation as it should have been killed immediately. It was about new teachers that come in, and the new teachers don't have to go to college per se. They don't have to have a teaching certificate. They don't have to go through everything that goes along with it. So if you were a new teacher 10 minutes ago that went through all of that, you didn't qualify as a new teacher. A new teacher was what the bill was purporting. Anybody could be a teacher. Anyone can teach. And so therefore, that teacher came in and they got a 10% raise. Well, the bill did not see the light of day. In retrospect, maybe we should have let it out so people would understand what is really going on about that idea. And the whole concept of where we're moving now, and in New Mexico specifically, but as you saw, nationwide, as legislators, as yours, our bosses, you have to keep our foot to the ground and make sure that we understand what's going on, and you can do that. But nonetheless, that was a clear indication of where things can go awry when good things are, or you have some good ideas for children, and they can go awry just because someone has a different idea of how this is supposed to work. So how can you make a buck if you're a charter school, and we're talking about, and they're correct, the privatization? How do you make a buck? I brought up the whole teacher situation as an example of one of those where they give people money, the schools to run it, and what you do is you just underpay your teachers. Because remember, it's 10% for a new teacher. We didn't say where they started from. So if you start them at X, and then there's 10% of X, it's not going to give you very much, but X is not equal to what everybody else is making. On the other hand, it's very, very important, is that all teachers are going to be treated with the respect that they should be. And subsequently, you can pool money from the teachers, or you can live in substandard buildings, because remember, one of the options of being in a charter school is you, as the superintendent stated, there are some things that you can do some waivers on this and that, and those are those waivers that we would hope is going to be part of the influence of being innovative, not necessarily taking away. The one that's most obvious is the one that we have up there, the problem that we have in the state of Mexico right now, is we have the program up in Farmington that is a virtual charter school. Two issues that I'm always keeping my eye on. Virtually, they can take those students from anywhere, from Las Cruces all the way to Los Alamos. They don't even have to be in the building. We've already heard that. No need to. But think about it. Whether my concern is, are they going to be talking about a student in another state? We don't have those kind of rules. We've never talked about any rules outside of the state of Mexico. But keeping that in mind, how does that student get the support they need? And since they don't have a real building, all you need to have is a computer. Do they get the same amount of funds that the superintendent is having to deal with, having to build brand new buildings up in Rio Rancho? Yes, they get those same kind of funds. They're entitled to those kinds of funds. Entitlement. Entitled to those kind of funds, and how they move on it. Well, the Public Education Commission, your elected Public Education Commission, said no. Not once, twice. It was overruled. Not once, but twice. And so we have this right now, and I think we should be in court on this one, and we will be in court soon enough. But the issue there is, your Public Education Commission was smart enough to say that this is not the way things are supposed to be happening in New Mexico. So how do they make their money? They make their money by shortcutting and giving the child an opportunity that probably was not what the student or the parent had in mind until long after. As the chairman of education, I am privy to my number being all over the state of Mexico. I get calls from parents. So the initial statement, they have all these happy parents, I think they're great actors, to be honest with you, because I have a lot of parents who have called me over the years, over 24 years, have been calling me and saying, we've got some problems. We have some problems. I'm going back. How do I get back into the public school system? I thought it was a good idea, but it's not working. They should have just the greatest opportunity to move back as they have been moving in. Thankfully, we were smart enough to do that and move in that particular direction. So what happens when the not-for-profit schools, as opposed to a for-profit school, comes into the operation? I think there's where the issue comes in. We have some rules and regulations for not-for-profit. We're very, very specific as to exactly how schools move around from one area to the next area. We have them. The rules were set up so that you can come in from your particular district, and they have to have a school system that's set up for the charter schools in that particular district. I think the laws are pretty clear. I think they're very clear as to exactly how that sits. I didn't see districts. I did not see a plural on that one. With 30 seconds left, let me leave you some of my feelings about this. She talked about we're not ready to relinquish. Diane talked about this. And let me tell you what I think our problem is. We're not ready to give up this fight, because this fight is going to get nasty. It's going to get bad. Nationally, what's happening in Florida, we already know. I don't have to tell you it's happening here. And it's going to continue to happen here. One way around this is one thing that she said there's only another way to do it. There's still one more way, and we're doing it here. We're informed. And when you're informed, you make a good decision, and you don't allow these things to happen. Because remember, you're in charge of me. It's not the other way around. As a legislator, I work for you. You're in charge, and you're informed. It works.
Because I'm going third, I'm going to change some of my remarks and really talk about some of the things that haven't been talked about, but a little bit more on my experience first. When I was the Vice President for Educational Leadership at Santa Fe Community College, one of the programs that I oversaw was the dual credit program. And so I worked with a lot of charter schools as well as the regular traditional public schools, directed with students, with teachers, with principals on curriculum alignment to make sure that students were getting the educational outcomes that we expected when we aligned curriculum. And I'll tell you, from that experience, I can tell you it's very, very, very hard for schools to get aligned. And I have some very serious concerns that came from, working with that dual credit program, where a lot of students really didn't understand the responsibilities of and the obligations of taking courses at college level that were standardized across the nation, things like chemistry and so on, and they thought they went to soccer practice instead, that they would still pass courses, and they ended up doing so, at the charter schools because they were not held to the same accountability standards as those in the public schools. And so, I've started with a little bit of concern from my experience. I have seen exemplary charter schools, and they're all over the map. I mean, we have wonderful, wonderful charter schools in Santa Fe and across New Mexico, and then we also have ones where we really don't have much information or public accountability or transparency. And Representative Miera really talked about one of the topics that I'm going to be focusing on, which is this K-12 Inc., the New Mexico Virtual Academy, and some of the concerns, because the league was very instrumental in getting information to the Attorney General and to the state auditor about what was actually happening with the for-profit virtual academy, which has its own curriculum, and again doesn't align with New Mexico standards or with certainly what colleges and universities are expecting when students are graduating from high school. Do they know the things that they're required to learn? There are lots of concerns there. But as I say, I'm going to try to fill in some of the gaps, and I was asked to focus on the for-profit, how do even nonprofits, how do they have corporate interests? So anyway, I'm going to focus on some of that and the for-profit virtual academy. We have the league has always believed in public education, and thinking, as Dr. Sue Cleveland says, that it is the kingpin, it is the key to democracy. And we have got to basically focus on making sure that we have a uniform system that's high quality, that's adequately funded, and so on. And when you're seeing things like the for-profit virtual academy making the same amount of money per student as a school that has to supply not just the facilities, but all, take care of all the teachers, the counselors, the physical education facilities, the health, and so on, we have major concerns. And then when you look at the fact that the school management is not really done by the Farmington Municipal Schools, it is not open to transparency. They make little reports about what's going on, but they do not, their schools have for-profit, the K-12 Inc. has a corporate advisory board, corporate curriculum, and so on. And I just for fun, this is a little personal, they decided that I would sign up as a teacher, and I also decided I would sign up as a parent. And just be interested in how I would be treated, because after I've taught for many, many years, I figured I'd be qualified to teach for K-12. And the rush to hire me And to get my child into K-12 Inc. was really scary. I still get lots of solicitations. I go on the internet for other topics and it pops up. You know, K-12 Inc. pops up. The money that is in this, in the corporations to try to pull people from the regular public schools is really, really scary. So, you know, so I'm not going to focus on much on the nonprofits, except for to look at the money that's going into it. We have some principles that I will go over quickly, and you know, essentially we believe that we need to have a uniform, high-quality educational system where we have teachers who are certified or otherwise qualified. I mean, I know that there are lots of people who have masters and doctorates in their fields who are otherwise qualified. They don't necessarily have to be certified, but essentially a lot of the charter schools are not looking at the teacher qualifications. They're looking at people who are willing to work for the salaries, without the lower salaries usually, without the benefits of being part of the retirement systems or health benefits, and also are ones who may be the newer teachers for whom the incentive pay would be very attractive. But usually, you know, they're paid a little bit less and they have fewer qualifications. A lot of the student admissions policies and dismissal policies are not uniform, and you know, they change across the charter schools. One of the issues that we have seen with the New Mexico Virtual Academy, the K-12 Inc., is they have a 44% withdrawal rate. So, and a lot of those students withdraw because, again, the isolation that's been discussed today, you know, working at their homes, at computers, and not having the social engagement and other things. And they are dropping out to become homeschooled. Well, there is apparently no follow-up to find out what happens to those students who are supposedly being homeschooled. You know, are they graduating? Are they, what's happening? Are they getting GEDs? As far as I can tell from my questions to the Legislative Education Study Committee, there's no follow-up on this, and so a lot of the students are actually truant, even though they're officially enrolled in the schools, and the for-profit is actually receiving all the funds as if the students are there. So we believe basically that public money should not be allocated directly or indirectly to private or denominational schools or for private school scholarships. We need to have an efficient system where all students have access to appropriate educational activities within the public school system. Direct or indirect funding for public-private partnerships, if allowed, should complement district educational programs and not duplicate them. We've heard today that they're not just for innovation. There are a lot of charter schools that are duplicative of what's going on in the public schools, but a lot of times they lack the amenities that a lot of public schools have to have. For instance, in my work with the charter schools in Santa Fe, Monte del Sol Charter School, which is an excellent school, actually used the facilities, the gym, fields, and so on at Santa Fe Community College. That students would sign up for dual credit and so on. Of course, a lot of times they didn't come, and it's a transportation issue to get the 10 minutes or 15 minutes from the school from the charter school to the college, and taking classes in which they're required to do certain things, and they're not getting the same experience, and only a very small fraction of the students actually got physical education opportunities, and again, only a small fraction got the enrichment kinds of courses like art and music and so on. We believe also that local school districts must have management oversight responsibility of any school within the district, public or private that receives public money. We've been talking a little bit about the virtual schools, which are actually state chartered, as Representative Miera was mentioning. They're really not under any oversight. And the K-12 in New Mexico Virtual Academy have been declared unconstitutional by the Attorney General for that reason. But when you get back to the ones that are part of the school districts, which is the majority of the charter schools, there is really not as much oversight of these public schools that are called charter schools as they should be. They're receiving public money, and they should be forced to comply with the state regulations, and they should have strict criteria for staffing and administration, fiscal management, and and overcoming basically the transparency issue. Make sure that all the board meetings are open to the public, and that the governing board be accountable. With the public schools, traditional public schools, you have voters choosing the school board. With the charter schools, you have different people who are volunteering to be part of the charter school. And in many states, people who are on the charter school board have been asked to leave school boards, but they will not. And to remove somebody who is unsavory from a charter school board often is really difficult, if not impossible. There are a lot of lawsuits that have gone into that. Again, I'm talking about the problems. I know that there are a lot of wonderful school boards overseeing charter schools, but I'm looking at the potential for abuse and lack of transparency and accountability. We do have good laws in New Mexico. We're very lucky. I just came from the National League Convention and went to a caucus, and I'm part of a national caucus on charter schools. And the horror stories that I'm hearing from other states, we've heard a lot about Florida, Michigan, Tennessee, Minneapolis, New York. They're hair-raising. And so I want to thank Representative Miera and the Education Committee for killing the bad bills and for making us at least a better state to be able to fight off some of the corporate efforts. We believe that every student in New Mexico should have a high-quality education, regardless of race, family income, or geographical location. A lot of times, because of the transportation issue, because there is no public transportation to charter schools, it's only the parents who are able to transport their kids to charter schools who are able, who have actually applied for the lottery. And we have caring parents, wonderful caring parents who want their students to have different experience than the public schools. And so, a lot of those parents who are the most concerned ones, and they are actually taking their children to school and picking them up. And then for the lottery, at least in New Mexico, in Santa Fe, anyway, they are, the charter schools are allowed to pick siblings of the ones who've already been admitted. So you're ending up with a different demographic, usually, in terms of income. And, oh my gosh, 1 minute. I have to hurry up here. I will basically go on to some of the for-profit opportunities that corporations have. We heard a little bit about hedge funds today, and then we have a lot of things that are happening in terms of real estate. One of the great corporation interests is making money through the leases for the public schools and the charter schools. and for management. And I'll just end with this statistic. In Michigan, the corporations are making up to $30 per square foot in leasing the facilities. And New Mexico does not allow, money to go for facilities, so that has to come from instructional costs, meaning there's less to spend on the student. Well, I'll cover some things in the questions, I hope. Thank you very much.
And Jerry Ortiz, if you don't participate in 6 of those. I see the Midi Arts Charter School director here. One of the charter schools that I felt was really important. And so I am pro-charter. This might not be the best audience to say that, but I am pro-charter. But I'm particular about what charters I am supportive of. If a charter is really doing something that's very different, I think that that's innovative and it's a good idea. But the privatization of public education really is something that people need to pay attention to, and the charter schools have become part of that. I am the founding board member of an organization, a nonprofit, called the Southwest Educational Partners for Training. It delivers a GED program at RFK in the evening for the parents. It's a really important piece of what we do. We saw privatization come early when Pearson bought the rights to the GED. And it went from being $35 to $125. Now, the legislature is going to have to do something because they don't give enough money to pay those other fees. That test now is online. We can't buy a book to get ready for the GED anymore because Pearson hasn't produced it yet. But they do have online tutorials that you can be charged for, right, to get your GED. The GED will be in Spanish sometime soon. Seems like they ran it through some translator. It doesn't make much sense to the Spanish speakers. So there's a real problem, and it's already here. It's happening. People have been asleep. Representative Meredith has been telling me. Privatization, privatization. We saw it with proprietary schools, right? You can get a nursing degree now. I have students that graduate from RFK that go to a proprietary school and become dental assistants. They have a $23,000 student loan and are making $11 an hour. Proprietary schools really are part of privatization. They get access to those student loans. Proprietary schools make up 10% of the student population that's going to college. They make up 30% of all the student loans and 50% of all the student loans in default. So the federal government just passed a new law going to raise the interest on those student loans. Corporate America gets that, right? It really does. So capitalism is alive and well in New Mexico in education. The education budget makes up 50%? 43%. $2 billion, $2.1 billion. That's a lot of money. Capital moves, right? Wall Street moves capital. How does capital move? Rate of return versus risk. Okay, not a lot of risk in the funding formula. You get the money for those students, right? It's guaranteed. Not much risk in a student loan that the government's going to guarantee. Corporate America gets this. They want access to that money. They want to see it flow freely. I'm co-chair of Albuquerque Interfaith. I see some Albuquerque Interfaith folks here. They get this. We've been talking about privatization for 7 years, ever since the GED. We supported a bill last year to reinstate the Public Education Commission as an elected body that would oversee public education and eliminate the Secretary of Education's position. Get the politics out of education. That PEC is an elected body. It's an important elected body. It approves the charters. And when they vote against the charter, because they're worried about privatization of education in New Mexico, and the Secretary of Education overrides it and approves that charter, there's a lot of politics in this corporate takeover of education in New Mexico. People need to pay attention. I attended an LESC meeting, they took it far, far away, probably in Clovis or Portales where nobody was there. and they talked about this, about privatization. Company out of Arizona, Star, something, was franchising schools in India. So he thought he'd come franchise some charter schools in New Mexico. Wanted to open 5 charters all at the same time, virtual charter schools. Right? Company comes in out of El Paso. Only experience they had in education was running a little private school in El Paso. They closed it because they wanted to come and open 5 charter schools in southern New Mexico and run them from El Paso. It works. So how do you start a charter school? So I've been to Anthony, New Mexico. I can do 20 community meetings. I can get a couple hundred people pretty excited. I need 3 people, maybe 5. And I can form a governance council, an interim governance council. That's all I need. I can submit that application. I can get that through. My charter school is open. I get to pick those people. There's a big problem in oversight of charter schools. If those people are all in favor of a corporate model, then yes, let's sign that contract with that for-profit management company and have them in here right away. Let's sign up for that online curriculum and give every student a laptop and let them stay home. Let's let the teachers stay home. Right? We don't need a building. Right? We'll collect the money. It's here. It's happening. I see the advertisement on TV. Right? Little girls upstairs working on the computer. Mom's downstairs making dinner, coming to dinner. How was school today? It was great. All right, so RFK is a charter school that was talked about in the video about that charter school that was really created to serve those students who weren't being served. Our target's about 25%. Right? That's the mission of the school. We're to that mission. We have a child development center. Open from 8 in the morning to late at night. We have classes from 8 in the morning to late at night. If you have a job, you need to come at night, we're going to get that to work. If you have a child, come to school. Going to be a good parent. Got a school-based health center. I have students who come at 14 and they're opiate addicts. If they're willing to stay clean and take a drug test, we're going to get them an education. This past year we had a parent of a student who graduated 3 years ago. Graduated. She's already got her first year at C&M. Already done it in dual enrollment. She's going to work at her with childhood development. RFK has that flexibility. It has a good working relationship with the district. It's on 10 acres of the district's land. District, through the bond, through public money, building a gymnasium and multi-purpose center. The last speaker talked about part of the privatization. There are no facilities for charter schools, so real estate developers have stepped up. They've stepped up and delivered in big ways. There's big money. So there is money that comes from the legislature through a lease reimbursement. And that money is now going to people that own these buildings. Charter schools don't have much choice. They need to get into public building. Representative Meredith told me a long time ago, early bird catches the worm, he told me. So I've been at it a long time, and I'm in a public building. Charter schools need to be in public buildings, and instead they're in these strange little commercial pieces of property that they can get e-occupancy on. I drove by one the other day, there's 2 of them now, right on Randolph by the airport. When those kids are getting out of school, you can't get by. It's a disaster. Charter schools are having to find a building wherever they can find a building. There's a little charter school on North 4th, next to one of the smallest elementary schools in the district. That's where they could find somebody willing to work with them on that facility. Virtual schools haven't made it. It's the answer. They don't need facilities. They're just going to take your money out of the state. K-12, I know about them. I was down in Anthony, right? When I started charter school, I go to meetings, I train the governance council. I was down there, here comes K-12 with an attorney. Well, Robert, what are you doing here? I said, well, I wrote the charter. What are you doing here? We're here to offer you K-12. We want 98% of your operating budget. You can keep 2% and do whatever you want with it. The rest of it is going to Arizona. That's where they were operating out of. Teacher's going to be in Arizona, the administrator will be in Arizona, you don't need to do anything. We're going to give them all laptops. My last 3 charters, K-12, came to every single governance council on day. Signed the contract. Right? They couldn't do it, so they got companies to come in and set up their own charter schools. It's not like publishers weren't at the table to begin with, right? I mean, they were selling textbooks. I think we've got Common Core now. Common Core has been described as like hooking up 110 all across the nation, so every single online application now plugs into Common Core. It's going to work real well. Maybe Common Core is good, maybe it's bad, but it's going to work well for the corporations, absolutely. Right? They've got that down. I don't care if it's K-12 or any of the others. I was reading, who's it? Murdoch. What's his name?
Rupert.
Murdoch sees K-12 education as a $500 billion business opportunity. He's a smart capitalist. He knows what he's doing. I believe him. I do, I believe him. In 2010, he bought a company for $360 million. He was getting the game late so that he could get his News Corp out there online and collect the money from all these other schools for his online service. So we can start a charter school. A couple of people here, we'll have a little meeting, we'll send a letter, turn in the charter. That's what, right? Isn't that what you said? What's your charter? People say, oh, it's Robert's template, right? We could start one, right? We can do it virtually online. Everybody get a check, everybody can sign up. How many eyes are on the student? Who's watching? Where's the accountability? Where's the transparency? Charter schools have to meet every law in every district. The transparency is there, the audit's there, right? But when the people that are on that governance house saying, this is what we're here for, we're here to move this along, then that's what they were put there for. And who's to say they shouldn't? So 21% of all high school students in APS now attend a charter school. 21%, 1/5. That's a lot of votes. That can affect school board elections. Right? That can affect bond elections. People need to pay attention. And I'm pro-charter. That's all I have. I want to see the 30 seconds.
I hear that the science and the social studies textbooks are quite conservative.
Well, I guess just one other comment that's somewhat related to that was it was very interesting at one of the last LESC meetings. We had a member raise the issue of as church or parochial schools convert to public charters, how does the state step in and deal with that issue? And the public ed department was very clear in saying the expectation of the state was that any religious instruction was simply could not be included in that. But this individual was raising the concern that sometimes that line is very hard to identify, and where you draw it certainly is to a very large degree a matter of your own personal worldview and religious beliefs, and so that's probably not as simply done as some people might think.
And just for Representative Miera and others, how much money does our state give to charter schools? And how many do we let become charter schools each year?
How much do money overall give to charter schools? And how many trustees do we allow each year?
Thank you for the question. I don't know the answer in direct dollars. I can get that for you, whoever asked me that question. I'll give you my card afterwards. I'll get you the direct money. Some of those may have charges. Probably should have brought that information with me. Should have it on the tip of my tongue. And the latter says we cannot have over 99 charter schools, if I'm not mistaken, in the state. And we're getting real close to that right now. And then the other one I talked about, we can't have more than 10% of a entire student population from a district that is used by a charter school, and I think the other one that got really close to that was up near, right above Taos in that particular area up along the mountains, but that school didn't make it all the deal. So we have a couple of districts of the 89 districts that are getting pretty close to a charter school meeting their limits, and the other one is 99, and we're getting really close to that in New Mexico right now.
You're trying to think of west side?
Yeah. I saw a statistic through the Charter School Association, which is a professional organization which our Secretary Designate of Education belongs to, and so on, is that we have 98 charter schools in New Mexico and approximately 20,000 students. So when you say 99 is the cap, that is very, very close. And yet, 11 more schools were chartered last year in New Mexico, and some of these are the state charter schools. So I don't know what's happening with the state chartered schools. I mean, I'm interested because I think that's the whole push, is to have more of these kind of magnet schools and charter schools as the districts max out on the 10% limit. And so we'll see.
And I stand to be corrected. Believe me, you can only hold up so many numbers when you're doing like a $5.6 billion budget. I'm giving student numbers here and there. But the bottom line is that the PEC is responsible for that, and I think they've done an exquisite job taking care of those numbers and keeping an eye on that and holding hearings for that. That's a Public Education Commission elected board.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Any questions about, a few questions about how admissions to charter schools come about, how they publicize to the parents, and are there policies for admission for charter schools? I mean, do they have to take special ed? I mean, but generally, how is it publicized and how do parents apply?
So I think that's different for different charter schools. At RFK, our max number is 450. We will have no intention of ever reaching that. Every student that applies to RFK gets in. We take all students, all ages. Special ed is something that we are really proud of. At RFK, we do a good job with it. But it's very different at different schools. So we work through the community, through families. Superintendent of APS says it's not that APS couldn't do what RFK does, it just doesn't. And so APS recognizes that. APS does a lot of referrals to RFK for students before they throw them out. I wish they would do it before they even suspend it. It would make a little more sense.
Some charter schools are really doing lots of marketing, and I think you saw in the Bill Moyer's Diane Ravitch interview that they're actually spending lots of money on ads and so on to try to get people into the charter schools, and the for-profits are definitely there. So it also depends on the hedge fund investors and the real estate developers. In Florida, the League of Women Voters of Florida has just done a comprehensive 2-year study and published that on, you can get that Florida story, League of Women Voters Florida. And they have seen that because the hedge fund investors are making so much money from the lease agreements, from the construction of new facilities, and so on, they are helping to advertise to get more students in. And the claim is that there are thousands of students waiting to get into charter schools. And one of the promises that's being given is to foreign investors. And if you think you've heard everything, we have a federal law called the EB-5 that allows foreigners to come in urban districts. They would have to invest $1 million. In rural districts, $500,000. If they can create 10 jobs, basically the whole family gets a green cards, and they are able to stay in this country. So, needless to say, these foreign investors, and there are loads of them across the country, are basically pushing to make sure that the enrollments are, are up, and that they get their money back. And the average, if you look at the Green Fund America or Education for America Fund, the promises that the corporations are making in terms of investments, and pretty much they can make their money back in 2.5 years with, pushing these schools. The National Education Policy Center, based at the University of Colorado, is saying, quote, there is cause for skepticism in the claiming the number of students who are waiting to get into charter schools, and saying that 4,000 new charter schools need to be built in this country. So there's lots of marketing going on. We have to be suspect.
I'm going to take the moderators because if there any oversight, I do a lot of health policy, and we have to do a lot of things avoiding insurance companies from cherry picking healthiest people. Is there any type of oversight to make sure that charter schools are not selecting the easiest students to educate? Is there any oversight of that?
I am not aware of any oversight within the APS district of any lottery. So students come in through a lottery system. So it's not first come, first serve. You're on the list. Everybody gets an equal shot at getting in to fill in the openings for that next coming year. So it's pretty much the honor system among charters that they're going to do the lottery system. When we do a lottery, we do it in an open meeting. But it's not like the public's coming to the governance council meeting to watch. But there is a law that says that everybody gets an equal chance to get into every school. So parents go around and they'll sign up, maybe they went to parents like charter schools. And when they go to an elementary charter school, then they want to find a middle charter school. Their students feel safe there. So then they want to find a charter high school. And so they have to go around and get on 3 or 4 or 5 different charter school lottery lists to see which ones they're going to get in. But that's the system. So they shop for their first 3 or 4 picks and then see which one they get in. And that charter school has some openings because all the parents were shopping, and so it's a second round to fill, right? So, but there's a lottery system, and everybody's supposed to have an equal chance.
I wanted to make one more comment from the national perspective. The House, Congress has already passed a bill, it's called the 2014 Charter School Act, and the Senate has not yet passed it, but basically there's going to be, with Race to the Top funds and all these U.S. Department of Education funds, there's going to really be a push to expand the number of charter schools in this country. And again, work on the tax investments. Right now, investors, can have tax-free investment credits. So when they're investing in these in the charter schools, they don't pay taxes on those investments. So you're going to see a remarkable expansion of the number of charter schools if that passes the Senate, and it's got bipartisan support.
I think there's one other issue too. I think one is the issue of getting into the school, and then the second issue has to do with the retention of those students. And I think that's one of the things as Representative was talking about, is looking at how many students are retained and how many students are not retained. And of course, we're looking at that in all areas of public education. Certainly, we're looking at in terms of the numbers of students that we graduate. But we do occasionally have parents who come back and say, I basically was told that the school is not really a good fit for my child, and you're welcome to stay, but we just may not be able to provide some of the services that you want, need. And then it's up to the parent to decide whether they still wish to stay under that or not. I think that all of our schools, whether they're charter or traditional public, try very hard to meet the needs of all of our students. But sometimes it isn't. Parents have told me it's not always a good fit. And but the choice is up to the parent as to whether they want to continue that or not.
I just want to make a comment, because RFK is a little different in that regard. So retention is different for us. When you come to RFK and you've been out of school for 3 or 4 years, or you're coming into 9th grade and you're at the 4th grade reading and math level, there's some issues, and attendance was probably one of those issues. Now, parenting is behind some of that attendance issue, and if there isn't strong parent support for that student being in school, it's really difficult for the school to make the student show up. So at RFK, we're not going to make any gains when the 4 grade levels behind unless they're going to be there every day. So we lose a lot of students because they're not willing to make the behavioral changes that are going to make them successful. So half the students don't get through the RFK orientation program for that first semester because they're not willing to show up at least 80% of the time. Now, it doesn't mean we don't want to see them come back when they're ready to make that effort. So sometimes a student at 14 doesn't act the same way as they do when they're 16 or when they're 17. And if they're ready at 17 to show up 90% of the time, then we're glad to see them. So we process twice as many schools as students as we're funded for because we don't let them sit around. If you're not there, you lose your seat, you can come back when you're ready to make a commitment. So that retention for us is sort of a minimum quality standard that you're going to be there in order to learn.
And let me add one more thing and see if anybody else wants to make some additional comments. And we deal with some of that too. We end up with students who walk into our door and I'm 16 and I have 1 or 2 credits. What can you do for me? And so we look at those young people and we say we've got to find a way to keep them and we've got to find a way to get them through. And so they may want to go to one of our traditional comprehensive high schools, but we really push for them to make the choice to go to independence or some other, both are good, both are really viable options, and it's up to them to choose which of the 2. But in one case, you really don't have much of a chance. I mean, you're probably not going to be there until you're 23, and another gives you a chance to accelerate that program and to get a diploma. It's not the same diploma, not the same number of credits, but we certainly have, all of us have challenges, as we have young people who come in who've made some very difficult choices and are now trying to deal with the consequences of that choice. And we as a school system have to do our best to respond to the needs of that child, whoever they are, whatever they come with at that given point in time.
All right, we have 3 questions relating to for-profits or the K-12 others in this. So that, I'm going to read them and then you can address them. If Mexico's Constitution says no public funded dollars for private schools, how did K-12 get a claim on public money? I'm not sure it did, but I'll read it. And a virtual child school in New Mexico has ignored regulations that are illegal. What are the remedies available for this violation? And then the third one, for-profit operated schools have opened providing a virtual learning platform to thousands of students. What are some of the avenues that can be taken to prevent for-profit schools from infiltrating New Mexico?
I couldn't hear the end of that question. From Gracie?
What? Some of the avenues can be taken to prevent. Some of the avenues can be taken to prevent for-profit agencies, I think it is, from infiltrating New Mexico.
I think you've asked the question that is dogging us right now with regards to the laws, and how much of that, as I stated earlier, we will be in court. We'll be in court on some of these issues. We can slide around it as much as we possibly can, but they're going to be in court. The first one being that law, that one that's K-12. Initially, it was not accepted by the local school board. They voted no to that, to allow it. Then the secretary designate overrode that and said it was okay. And the Attorney General's opinion was was asked, and I think now we're in the business of lawsuit with regards to specifically that as a private firm. Because of this major issue is who makes money. It's a private organization if somebody is making the money, or are we utilizing that money, putting it back into the classroom, which is what it's supposed to be for, i.e., people, of course, get a salary, but is there a profit margin to be expected on that one? The way we roll out the money is based on the child. Is there a profit margin? So that's issue number one. But most importantly, number two, is who is in control. If you look at the Constitution, it says the money or the state has to be in control of the school. Who's in control? Is the board that was legally put together that charter school? Are they in charge? Or is somebody from New York in charge, or Houston, or wherever else? Are they in charge of A, the curriculum, and B, the profit margin? Once we establish that, then it's really clear-cut whether or not they violated the Constitution.
K-12 is unconstitutional is very, very important, and the last I have checked with the LESC and with the Attorney General's Attorney General Department, they had not had any response from K-12 Inc. Now, maybe there's a countersuit, or there's some suit saying that they are legal. I really don't know, but they seem to be ignoring the declaration that this is unconstitutional, and they have a 5-year contract to operate. Yeah, before it's renewed. Charter. Yes. So in other words, they may just keep on operating. One of my, I don't know why I like to do this, but I read through the minutes of all of the board meetings at Farmington Municipal Schools, and to just see what the reporting actually was and the oversight. And basically, the municipal schools, really, the school board does not have much to say or much information even about the K-12 Inc. that's supposedly operating under their umbrella, and which is one of the reasons that it's a great concern what's happening. There's huge profits with the K-12 Inc. It's being sued in many states. I think 12 states have already sued K-12 Inc. And the prospects for Wall Street is, that it may not be quite as profitable for investors in the future. But people are still making lots and lots of money. And again, they can get, if they're wealthy investors, can get up to 39% because they don't have, to pay taxes on the money that they're investing in what's called the new markets.
I might recommend reestablishing an elected body to oversee public education in the state of New Mexico, so the voters' voice can be heard.
One of the things you hear sometimes is, there's not much chance of that, or this is a rather remote thing, or it doesn't happen very frequently. And about a year ago, I was at the governing board meeting for AASA in Washington, D.C., and we had an interesting speaker. She was a bright, articulate, very well-spoken young woman, and she addressed the governing board, and she just said very clearly, it was just very matter of fact, our goal is to dismantle public education in this country. Our goal is to turn it over to the private sector for profit, and we think we can accomplish that in the next 5 years. I don't know. She wasn't the most popular speaker at the conference, I can tell you. But I respected her honesty, and I respected, the very high level of confidence that she had, that she thought that this could be accomplished, and that it could be accomplished in a very short period of time.
All right. Well, I was just informed.